Hey, what's going on, Chooms? JonJonTheWise, and I got another Cyberpunk video for you guys. This time I have on Guy Sclanders, aka How to Be a Great Game Master. Today we're going to be talking about his book, The Practical Guide to Being a Great Game Master. He also gives really awesome advice about Cyberpunk. So if you want to check out that book and purchase it for yourself, www.greatgamemaster.com, and over there you can purchase the book. It'll ship to you wherever you are. There's an audiobook version as well up there. You can find it on his website. Make sure you guys subscribe to his YouTube channel as well, How to Be a Great Game Master. If you love my channel and you love the kind of instructional videos I do, he does amazing generic general videos about being a great game master. But before we get completely into the video, you know the drill. Join the Discord community. It is a Cyberpunk Discord community. The link is in the description below. We're just waiting for you guys to join us. Make sure you guys follow me on social media at JonJonTheWise everywhere. Subscribe to the podcast, Tabletop Cyberpunk, where you'll get this video as an audio form, so you can take it on your commute. And of course, last but not least, if you want to support this channel, this podcast, go to patreon.com/JonJonTheWise. That is the best way to support this channel. But of course, if you cannot support in that way, I completely understand. A like, a subscribe, a share, a comment, all these things help with my channel immensely. So I want to thank all of you for all your support and enjoy the show. Hey Chooms, how you doing? JonJonTheWise here. Welcome to another episode of Tabletop Cyberpunk. I have a returning guest with me, Guy Sclanders, aka How to Be a Great Game Master. Guy, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you very much. I'm happy to be talking to you today because we're going to be talking about your brand new book, The Practical Guide to Becoming a Great Game Master.
Correct.
And it is a Kickstarter project that wrapped up about late last year. I don't know exactly when. Was it November?
Yes, but this was 2021.
Gotcha.
Because we're in the new year now. I hate that. It's like last year. Was it last year? No.
I know.
My goodness.
I'm just glad we got past the jokes of see you next year. You know, we're done with
absolutely.
that.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. It's lovely to have you on because I loved your first book, the long titled one.
Guide.
Yeah.
My books, by the title of the book, you should know you will never learn how to make a short titled book. Because yes, Complete Guide to Epic Campaigns was...
Sorry, folks, we just had a quick hiccup with technical difficulties. If you see any edits in the video, that's all I'm taking out is the boring silence of technology. We're going from London to LA, you know, so things happen in between.
Yeah.
There's gremlins in the air. But yeah, I'm happy to have you here, Guy, because I've read the book. I love the book, as always. It's amazing. It's like somebody asked you, hey, Guy, can you write every nugget of wisdom that you have about tabletop role-playing games? I mean, everything is in this book. Why don't you run us through the idea of what inspired you to write the book in the first place after the previous book? Was there something that happened in between where you're like, you know, I got to put another one out there?
Yes, absolutely. So I think I had always approached DMing kind of in the way that the books prescribe it, which is where the GM is responsible for creating the story and is responsible for the villains and the encounters and the narrative and is really an adjudicator. And it doesn't really matter what role-playing system you think about. Whenever you read the GM section, that's kind of what they start with is, oh, well, you're responsible for embodying the different NPCs and you're responsible for this, you're responsible for that. And so the mentality that seems to engender in all of us is that the GM has to be this all-knowing deity that is running the game rather than playing the game. And I've never liked that idea to begin with, because it's like, well, why the hell would someone want to, you don't get someone to come and run Monopoly while the rest of you play it. So why would someone want to do that? And I think we see that. We see DMs and GMs going, oh, I can't, it's too much work. It's too much. I don't know how to do it. It's too intimidating. And again, you're going, but why? What? And I personally think it's because there is all of this perceived pressure that is placed upon narrators, DMs, GMs, whatever you want to call them. So the first book was very much the epic campaign, right? Where there is a very strong singular narrative. You are creating a saga for your player characters and your players to kind of work through. But that's only one type of campaign. There are other types of campaigns, player-based or player character-based campaigns, which focus on the character stories and what they want and how they want to grow and what they want to do. And then there's open campaigns where we don't have a big open thing. We just like these characters, we like the world, and we want to play in it. So why do we need to have bigger narratives? So there's all these different aspects. And epic campaigns does exactly what it hopefully says it does. It's about epic campaigns. I wanted to address the other ones, but I also wanted to address this idea that the GM is not allowed to play, but is there to officiate and to run stuff. And I always try to look at what it is that we have to do, what is it that is fun to do, and what are the parts that we fall over. And I think each of us has different areas that we kind of stumble over. Some of us are not so good at improv, some of us are not so good at creating maps on the fly, some of us are not so good at this or so good at that. And so I don't like to release a book which isn't as full of information as it could possibly be on that particular subject. I like to write complete books, and I like to know that when I say this is a complete guide to this or to that, it's got as much in it as I can possibly come up with to cover as many different aspects. And so I think that's really where this book came from. So instead of having a plot, instead of having the GM coming up with a fixed narrative outcome, which causes many more problems, I think, than not coming up with a fixed narrative outcome. Let's get rid of that. Let's come up with a plan. And it's not the GM's plan. It's not the creator's plan. It's an NPC's plan. So if you do that, a lot of those pressures that you as the GM have suddenly just vaporize. And the more I've put this into practice, because this comes through whenever I'm writing a book, it's like, okay, this is my idea. This is my concept. This is what I'm thinking about. This is what I've kind of observed. Let me try it in my own games. Whenever I forget to do it, whenever I kind of fall back onto the, oh no, this is just, I'm following a plot, or I immediately watch my game just crumble, which I hate. I absolutely hate it. So combine all that together. I said this book can show us everything that we need to support us as creators, and it's the three different aspects that kind of make up being a GM that the book is kind of divided into.
Yeah, I love the way that it's set up, because it's like it's trying to help you identify who you are. It's trying to help you find your voice. Before we ever put pen to paper and write NPCs and stat blocks or any of that stuff, we got to figure out what makes you happy as a game master. What makes you motivated to come to the table, to want to play, to want to explore these worlds, put your players into it. And then you go from there. Then it's like, what are your players all about? And then now that we have all that information, we can put it all together. There's a really amazing excerpt that I put on my social media from the book. And this is one of those realizations that I had as a game master that gave me the exact same feeling. It's you, the game master, are not responsible for the plot or the NPC's plans, just as you are not responsible for the PCs or their actions. When I realized this, a massive burden was removed from my shoulders. The stress and panic were gone during the next game. My whole mindset shifted. I am not responsible. I am reactive. I must decide what the reaction will be to the actions of the PC, and when there are not reactions to the PC's actions, I am then responsible for creating a situation where the PCs can take action. thus setting in motion another round of me reacting to their actions. If there's any advice that I could ever give game masters, it's this one, because it frees you from the stress of trying to figure out, how do I make this plot work? How do I make the big bad guy this, that? Just be in the moment. You already set the roadmap for everything. Let your players figure it out. They're there to do that, really. And all you have to do is react to their situations. And there's more nuggets of wisdom, but that's like one of the biggest ones that you just mentioned right now, where reacting to your players is one of the most important aspects. What do you think about how can we really like nail that home with people?
I think that that for me, as you say, was a turning moment. But to add perhaps some clarity on that, is the GM is not reacting to what the player characters are doing. The NPCs are reacting to what the player characters are doing. As a GM, you're not in that scene. You are the overseer, right? The NPCs are in that scene, or they are going to be suffering the consequences of that scene. So how do they react? And one of the things that I think is so interesting is oftentimes I have GMs going, oh, well, I don't know what they would do. I don't know why they would do that. Well, that's what they are then doing. If you don't know what they would do, they might not know what they're doing. So don't panic. Step back and say, okay, well, let's say, for example, the player characters blow up the Death Star. What would Darth Vader do? Oh, I don't know. Well, neither does he. And neither does anybody else, because all we know is at the end of the movie, he's left in his ship sort of spiraling out into the middle of nowhere. And then we see him later on once he's got his wits about himself. So we can take that moment, and that shift of it's the NPCs and the PCs doing their stuff. And you as the GM are there just looking at the information going, yeah, sure. So what does this NPC know? What does this NPC want? What is this NPC trying to achieve? What have the PCs now done? Now let me decide. Let me role play. Let me actually do some role playing as a character in my own freaking game and figure out what to do. And that changes it completely. As you say, there's no stress or burden. And I ran a game, it was last night, as a matter of fact. And I forgot, for the first hour of the game, I was in such structure. I have this plan, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. I forgot what I should have been doing. And as a result, I walked away at the end of it going, I'm sorry, that wasn't really a fun session for me as the GM. Because I forgot my own advice, and it was only in the second half where I then remembered, hang on a moment, I'm panicking because this is not happening and this is not, I shouldn't be doing that. I should just sit back and they're going to tell me what's happening. And then at the moment I did that, my NPCs suddenly told me what was going on, and it became a much more interesting situation. So I think something that we tried to put into the book are these exercises called encounters, where you read a section and it says, right, this is what the section was about. Fill in your own details, explore this idea, make it your own, or not. Fundamentally, I or any GM who's been GMing for years, the one thing we can't give each other is experience. Sadly, as ironic as that is, considering the games that we play, right? It's all about experience, and that experience is practice, 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 practice. So the idea in the book is these are the concepts. These are all designed to help you so that you can put them into your game as easily as possible, but you will still have to practice it and practice it. And there are still moments when you're going to panic and forget stuff. But hopefully, as I did halfway through my session, you can remember, oh, I'm falling back into the old habit. I'm doing the old technique, which just doesn't work and doesn't do this and doesn't do that. So I don't know if that even answers your question. I mean, as I'm sure you can see in the book, sometimes it's like, this is the concept, and then it would ramble. I cannot say thank you enough to my editor, Pontus, who would get the manuscript and he'd read a chapter and he'd come back and he'd go, I like the chapter, but there are 4 different ideas in here, and 3 of them finish in this chapter and 1 of them finishes a chapter later. You got to bring it back, rework it, and that's the role of a good editor. And I'm so appreciative that he did, because he kind of consolidated all of this stuff into the right places. But anyway, that's an aside. I've lost your audio, because that's a thing.
There we go.
There we go.
Muted. Yeah, that's a thing. It's the being a game master is one of those things where there's so much nuance to it, and there really isn't a right answer for everybody, or else, you know, there would just be one book and we would all read that one book and we would all be great game masters. But I think this one does a pretty good job of that, because it's literally so much information for every aspect. Personally, I went into this book knowing my weaknesses as a game master. I'm sure there's other ones, but there's a couple that I know to be true. One is pacing, and another one is description. And I was able to find answers to those questions. There's a whole section on pacing in the book, and there's a whole section on description. And there's like great techniques for description. You said name 3 things, move on. Don't sit there and exposition the night away trying to figure out how black this the night sky is, you know what I mean? But what I really enjoy about being a game master is the idea that you're also playing the game, as you said before. And I've found myself at times in the past where I'm like stressing out, trying to figure out what to do, trying to juggle all these things. And then I stopped and I looked at the players. They're all smiling. They're all having a good time. And I'm thinking to myself, why am I stressing if everybody's having a good time? Obviously, I just need to go with it, go with the flow. As long as everybody else is happy, then I can find happiness in that as well. And this book really does help you figure out your voice, who you are, what you want to do. And there's nifty charts too that kind of tell you, like, you know, you're this kind of game master. This is the kind of game you want to play. And then there's other charts that tell you these are your players. These are the kind of games they want to play. And putting it all together, you can help yourself be a better game master. I really enjoyed that about the book. Talk to me about how writing and planning your campaign. How deep should somebody go into that? You know, should it be Post-it notes, bullet points? Should I come back in a year after I've written everything down? Or what's your advice on that?
So my immediate advice is never to plan too much. But that's me. And I know that there are others out there who draw comfort from having a lot more material prepared. And I think that that's a personal choice. I don't think there's ever going to be oh, well, this is the right balance or that's the right balance. Having said that, I do feel that if you are going to run an epic campaign, I call them epic campaigns, but this is just a campaign where there is a very clear nemesis that is in opposition to the player characters. Now, that nemesis could be a natural environment. You could be running a Survivor-style game where there's a volcano that's going to explode and it's about how do people survive that. That would still constitute a nemesis. But if you are running this epic campaign with a nemesis and you intend or you hope that your player characters will go through this experience and ultimately overcome the adversity that the nemesis is giving them, if that's your goal, right? The amount of planning shouldn't be how are my characters going to defeat this individual. That's not the right way to think, because the moment you do that, the player characters, they no longer have any choice because you've worked out how they have to do it. So if they don't do it that way, either you are going to get stuck, which is what frequently happens, because you're going, well, they were supposed to stab the vampire through the heart with a wooden stake because that's what my work said it should do, They've asked me, would it make a difference if they hit him with a nuclear missile?
Mm-hmm.
No, it won't. And so your players then feel disenfranchised because they thought that would be much more interesting than just a wooden stake. And you gave them no indication that it was the specific type of wood that was needed or that it had to be carved by an ancient monk on a hill somewhere. Or you tried to give it to that information to them, but it got lost in the mix, or they didn't pick up on it, which is also what happens, because we can make these amazing plans and these amazing plots, but if the player characters miss this critical information, you're going to get stuck going, but I told them that it had to be a specific thing from a specific place, and they ignored that, or they thought it was a red herring, or so when you set that aside, the planning that I do for a campaign is I say, what does my nemesis want to achieve? They want to achieve world domination, or they want to achieve world peace, or whatever. In the case of a natural event, it wants to release tension. It wants to explode. It wants to happen. You get the idea, I think. Once you work out what they want, you've got to work out how do they get there? What are the steps that they are planning on taking? Not what are the steps that they take. And there's a subtle difference between the villain is going to do this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and that is what is going to happen, and I'm going to plan out all of those steps, versus the villain plans on doing this, then getting this, then getting that. And the reason why there's a difference is that if you are saying this is what the villain does, when the villain doesn't do that, your rest of your chain falls apart. And the whole point of role playing, the whole emergence of story, is when the player character's goals and intentions are in direct opposition to the nemesis's goals and things. So the player characters should constantly be stopping the nemesis from achieving their goal, because if they don't, then the nemesis just achieves their goal, right? Mm-hmm. And if they do stop the nemesis, it's not that your campaign now ends. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is the biggest difference, is that the nemesis goes, okay, I have this idea. I want to do this, and I'm going to follow these steps. When the players stop that first step, the nemesis then, instead of the GM panicking, going, oh my God, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, or they've done it too early, you go, well, what is the nemesis now going to do? You were speaking about reacting and acting. The nemesis still has the same goal. But now they can't use that particular thing that they were going to use. So what are they going to do? Are they going to use a different thing? Are they going to try and research a different thing? Are they going to just get revenge against the player characters? And something that really helps is that you go, and what if the player characters then join with the nemesis? What if they go, you know what, that's a pretty good idea. I think actually, you know what, a giant cyber corporation that is a totalitarian state, I think that's better than the current anarchy that is reigning. And you go, well, you can't join him. You're supposed to be fighting against him. What voice said that? Oh, that was the GM who had plotted out this whole thing. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you've planned the steps for the nemesis and the player characters then join them, all that you have to do as the DM or the GM is to go, okay, well, their step one is to get the secret security codes to the nuclear bunker. Mm-hmm. I had thought the players were going to try and stop them from doing it. Now it's the players trying to do it. So whose perspective is now going to be in opposition to the players? Well, that will be the security guards at the bunker, right? At the nuclear silo network. And what are their goals? Well, their goals are to protect that thing. Mm-hmm. And how do I make that more interesting? Well, now I can do a little bit of role playing going, well, maybe the colonel who's at that nuclear silo really wants to become a general, and so wants to do something spectacular. Yeah. Or to allow something to get to a crisis point and then diffuse it as this great hero. Yeah. So now I have a new plan. And the PCs coming in, this colonel might play with them and let them get to the point where they're almost going to win so he can step in and save the day. None of that was planned. None of that was anything to do with me spending months or weeks in my studio trying to come up with this great narrative. It just organically happens by shifting the mindset to whose plan is basically being screwed with by the players.
And it's not like there is no nemesis now. Now there's a new nemesis. It could be the organization that originally gave the players, like, you know, let's say it's S.H.I.E.L.D., it's Nick Fury. He's like, oh man, they went rogue. Now we got to go after them. You know what I mean?
Correct. Or, and this is what I really liked about the system is you go, well, I had planned on it being an epic campaign where the player characters are working against a big nemesis. But if they join the nemesis, well, now I'm now running a player character campaign where I'm now following through on their goals for trying to take over the universe and instill this one order, whatever. Oh, okay. Well, that's just as interesting. It's not initially what I had planned, but everything that I've put in place still doesn't get thrown away. It's now just a different perspective, you know. So that's for me when I kind of conceived how to position that. I went, this is for me. This has got to be put down somewhere. And I remember doing the video on it where I was like, everything that I've spoken about previously, where you're coming up with a plot, is wrong. It's the wrong way of thinking about it. It's great if you're writing a book or if you're writing a movie. You need to do it that way. But we're not doing that. We're in our own unique storytelling space. And this is the way that I think it should be done. Anyway.
Yeah, I love that. And now your players will tell you what to do. So they'll be like, oh, you know, we need to get those codes. Look, guys, before we do anything, we got to get that bunker taken care of. All right, we got to go to that bunker. We got to get those codes from that bunker. And you as a game master are like, all right, the bunker's the next spot that I need to plan for. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they're giving you all the ideas that you need if you just react to them. And I hear a lot of game masters tell me, oh, I have these stories and I wish my players would be into the things that I want them to be into. And it's like, they're telling you what they want to do. They're telling you what they're into. So you don't need any hooks or convincing to go to that bunker. They already told you they're going to the bunker. Now make the bunker interesting. That's all you got to do. You know?
Exactly.
I think some of the best advice that you've ever given is the sentence. And really, if you deconstruct the sentence to be like the most general thing, is what it really is giving you is the story has a beginning, middle, and end. And when you take every story and you whittle it down to 1, 2, 3, beginning, middle, end, maybe 2 middles, that's your 1, 2, 1 method, right?
Right.
You generally have a framework of what your story is going to be. The players are introduced to the world. At the end, they fight the bad guy. In the middle, the bad guy ruins their plans and they got to restart. All right, that's like the general kind of thing that goes on. Now you got to figure out how to put those puzzle pieces together. And as you're reacting to your players throughout the campaign, that's always going to evolve. That's the idea of what your plans are, right? Is the evolution of things. What's your advice on adapting to the evolution of your campaign?
Yes. It's yes. Yes, you should adapt. There we go. That's my advice. So the campaign is definitely going to change. And one of the things that we talk about in the book is looking at your theme or your tone and going, well, this is the tone. My game is supposed to be a romantic war story. So you go, well, what the heck does that have to do with the whole narrative? And I think that's one of the things that I hope comes across in the book is realizing that what appears to be easy stuff to decide actually gives you so much power 6 months into your game or a year into your game where things have gone in all different directions, you go, how do I bring this back? How do I use structure, the 1-to-1, you know, the beginning, the middle, and the end? You go, okay, well, if you decide on your tone, halfway through the game, the players have signed up to go and attack this nuclear bunker, and they've got the nuclear weapon, and now they're going to go and do this, and they're going to do that. And you're like, where am I? How do I know what's my game? You can now step back and go, okay, well, let me apply my structure to it. Let me see where we naturally have arrived at, not constrained by it. Let me just see where we could be. We could be either still in the introductory phase, and that bunker was just the tip of the iceberg. If I can think of bigger things, if I know I don't have a lot of time, okay, well, getting that bunker was probably the middle point. So now I need something to go wrong. And it's not about you as the GM trying to create something that's gone wrong artificially. It's about you looking at, okay, what have the player characters done thus far? Who have they upset? What things are now in play? Where is there a power vacuum? Where is there this? Where is there that? And you go, but I need more guidance. I don't know where to look. Well, now you look at your tone, and if your tone is a romantic war story, okay, well, where is romance in this nuclear thing? Well, maybe I need to introduce some love interests or some poor people who are going to get affected by this nuclear weapon being deployed, and it's going to completely cause the player characters to have to stop and think and to reassess their whole plan. That is as equally powerful as having some random bad guy just miraculously steal the device from them. You're still kind of looking, you're still using structure to inspire you to options, but then you're using tone to kind of help guide your options. Or you go, well, I'm going to forget about the romantic part. Let me look at the war part. What could I have? Oh, if a nuclear device has been stolen, other governments may know about this. And that's going to cause all kinds of political ramifications, because each of those governments have got their own goals and they've got their own plans. This is now them intersecting in this whole thing. But because I'm in the middle of my story, I know I've still got some time to explore some big ideas. Whereas if I'm at the end, I got to wrap this up. I'm not adding in more elements. I'm not looking into a broader field. I'm now looking at how do I tie together all of the things that have happened in the past, still within my theme. So throughout the book, you are building this space to provide you with support, to help limit your range of thinking.
Constraints, right? You talk about constraints in the book. That's a big, one of the biggest nuggets of wisdom I got from the book.
Yeah. When you have the choice of anything can happen, which in role-playing games, that's one of the joys, is that anything can happen. How would you ever know which is the right choice to make? Because you can make any choice. So you get crippled and you don't make any choice, or you think you don't have any choice. So the constraints idea, tone, your structure, where are you in the structure, what type of adventure you're running, what type of campaign you're running, all of that is just narrowing your options down so that you then can choose. And you go, oh, actually, my theme is romantic war, so I'm now not going to introduce a musical. I'm not going to have some weird thing happening, or I'm not going to have a this happening, or I'm not going to have a that happening. I know that I can't even look at those options. I can look at these options or these options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In bringing it to Cyberpunk, if your players are like in a corporate zone, then you know the constraints of the corporate zone are much stricter police, cleaner streets, you know, if they're not dressed a certain way, that they're going to stick out like a sore thumb.
Exactly.
But as you know, on the other side of the coin, if they're in a criminal underground area, if they're wearing suits, there's no police, you know, these are all the different constraints going on. It helps you make decisions on the fly, and it also helps you make decisions for your campaign in the long run, because you know where your players are going to be and what the constraints are for the places that they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The other thing that you talk about, among a million things, is the OGAS, OGAS.
Yes. OGAS.
It's a really cool formula that I think, I'm sure other people do something similar, but this is a really great way to help people create NPCs. And another piece of advice that you give is not to make 1,000 NPCs. It's just make like 3 really important ones, write down maybe their OGAS and maybe a little bit more. But other than that, just use the OGAS method to create NPCs on the fly to give you the constraints that you need to be able to work with those NPCs. So tell us about OGAS.
Yes, OGAS. So OGAS is... it stands for occupation, goal, attitude, and stake. And occupation, I think I started with occupation because it gives you so many immediate constraints. So if the occupation of the character is a hacker, right? You immediately know this person is going to have very good computing skill. They're going to have possibly quite good code breaking, depending on what system you're playing, right? Depends on whether you've got skills or abilities or whatever it might be. They probably are going to be a little bit more dark room dwelling than sports fanatics out in the field in the sun all day, right? So we can start to apply some stereotypes. We can do the exact opposite, of course, and subvert those stereotypes. So the hacker is actually this giant gym god who works out every day at the gym while secretly hacking with the neural implant in their head. However you want to do it, right? So the occupation, not only does it give you what they're going to be good at, it gives you what they're going to be talking about as well on a general kind of basis. Problems with hacking, the difficulty of hacking, the stresses, the joys, the relief, how they got into it. So there's a huge amount of information that comes out of just choosing their occupation. Then you choose their goal. And if it hasn't become clear, everybody in your world should have a goal, because everybody on our planet has a goal. And everyone you talk to, oh, well, what are you trying to do this year? Survive, make some money, pay off a car, buy a house, have a family. There are thousands and thousands of goals. It could even be as simple as, I just want to go get a good cup of coffee, right? It gives them something to want to do. Now, if you are looking for opposition for your player characters, those goals can become far more elaborate. The hacker who their appearance is that they will help the players. Their goal, if we go very tropey, is to find their actual birth mother or father, or it's to find their true identity, or who knows what it could be, right?
Or, as simple as collecting a paycheck. The shopkeeper, absolutely. He could be like, I want to be the best shopkeeper in the land, or he could be, I'm just collecting a paycheck. That's all I'm doing.
Yes, exactly. And with that goal, they then will have plans. So if the plan is to get the paycheck, their plan is to carry on working diligently and hard. So when the player characters come up and say, hey, would you do this illegal thing? No, because it's going to jeopardize me achieving my goal. So no, I will not help you. You can try and convince them, but you as the DM, you're now far more aware of what resistance they might offer to the player characters. You didn't have to do any work. You literally just said, this is their occupation, this is their goal, and they're not going to necessarily jeopardize that. But for how long? And how are they going to respond to people who are putting pressure on them? Well, that's where the A and the S come in. And with the A, that's their attitude. What is their general state attitude? Are they casual? Are they laid back? Are they very uptight? Are they neurotic? Are they energetic? That is giving you the flavor of how they're going to express that goal and how are they going to perform that occupation. Because a depressed hacker might have, I don't know, some kind of vape thing hanging out of their mouth, and they sit there and they're all gloomy and their rooms are painted all black. A super happy hacker might have pink bunnies everywhere, right? So the attitude is going to give you the flavoring of the character. And then the stake, the S of OGAS, is how much effort they're going to put into maintaining all of those states. So how much stake do they have in their occupation? If it's a high stake, if they're the breadwinner of their family, which you decide on the fly, there's no reason to have to write this stuff down beforehand, they're not going to violate or jeopardize their occupation. But if they are car guard or they just don't care, then sure, they might accept a bribe because they don't have a high stake in it. If they have a high stake in their goal, they'll want to achieve that over and above everything else. So if the player characters start to talk about ways in which they might achieve their goal, well, that might override their occupation because you're feeding into their goal. And the same as with their attitude, they might be gruff and grumpy and negative towards the characters because they're having a bad day. But if their stake is quite low and the player characters are telling them things that they want to hear or giving them compliments, that attitude might shift and change. And so what that does is it completely elevates your NPC from being this sort of cardboard character who's one-dimensional emotionally to suddenly being a lot more flexible. And that's from 4 little letters that you suddenly have, well, you have this creature that exists and will now tell you as the GM what it wants to do and how it's going to do it and why it's going to do it and for how long it's going to do it. And when the PCs come on and interact with it, as the DM, you don't really have much choice. You're just following through all of those constraints and just relaying it to the player characters, or to the players, as a matter of fact, not to the player characters. So that's why I loved OGAS. It sort of boiled everything down into usable stuff that's quick enough that you can just do it on the fly.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. It's a great way to have NPCs have depth to them, because we can't plan every single thing about an NPC. I don't know what's going on with his family and his past and everything, but I can give general bullet points that can guide me, and then you're back to reacting to the players. The players will do something, and then you just go like, oh, well, this guy, this is his attitude, this is his occupation, blah, blah, blah. This is probably what he would say. And then you just do it. And right there, you're giving players agency. You're letting them decide what's going on in the plot and how the plot moves on. And you're providing them with the necessary NPCs. You actually mention a part in the book where your players are going to need NPCs. And that is a concept where you just have to be ready to react, to give them the NPCs that they want. That's why planning beforehand, it just doesn't make sense, because they might not need the 99 NPCs that you made. They might need the one, Exactly. So you're really just stressing yourself for nothing in that situation. Let me ask you about... we'll go into self-help after. I wrote a bunch of notes, by the way. Let me ask you about coincidence as a tool. You mentioned that in the book, how coincidence doesn't exist in the tabletop role-playing world.
Exactly.
It's something that is IRL, but it is not something that it is a tool for the game master. There are no coincidences. Why don't you tell me about that?
Correct. Absolutely. I wish that we had as much control over coincidence in real life as we do in our games. The reason why I say that there's no such thing as coincidence in our games, you as the DM are responsible for triggering everything. There is no NPC who is casually wandering down the street that the players are going to bump into that you haven't planned and controlled and created. You have to do that. So that means you are also creating every single opportunity that arises. That doesn't mean, though, that you have to make sure that every NPC that the characters bump into has something of value. And frequently, I find that they're bumping into NPCs. The NPCs have got their OGAS, they're doing their own thing. And after the interaction, I'm like, it would have been so much better if they had actually known the information that the PCs needed. Oh, well, they didn't know it. They didn't need it. At the same time, though, knowing that, okay, the PCs need that access code to that nuclear bunker, right? Or they need to know that they need an access code. I could pre-plan everything, where they follow a security guard to a nightclub, where they notice that he has a key card attached to his belt. But that's me trying to decide what the players are going to be doing. That's not me reacting. That's me creating a requirement.
They'll never see that key card.
Right? They'll never see the key card. Or they'll get to the nightclub and whatever happens, they end up shooting the security guard, which puts the nuclear bunker on high alert because one of their members was shot. And they change all of their access. You know, there are so many ways in which preconceiving that idea doesn't work. At the exact same moment, though, you go, sure, okay, so I don't want to have to require that to happen. But I've dropped some hints here and there. The PCs have done some investigation, but I know that they haven't picked up yet on that piece of information, which as the DM, I feel makes it more interesting to the story than them just being able to walk in through the front door, right? Because one of the constraints is, well, if we're doing cyberpunk, we kind of almost live in a cyberpunk world already. So there are certain expectations. We expect a nuclear bunker to have security cards. Because our players, for whatever reason, haven't thought about it, that's a different story. So we need to fill in the blank. So the players do this and they do that. And whilst they're busy investigating, they stop in at this nightclub. And because they're not following the security guard, they're doing something else. They sit down at the bar and there's a person sitting next to them who's bemoaning their fate that they've just been fired from this top secret facility. And one of the players decides to talk to them. I've worked out this person's OGAS is occupation, ex-nuclear bunker facility worker. Goal, get drunk and forget that they've just been fired. Attitude, depressed. Stake, low or high to get drunk as fast as they can to forget the situation, right? So the players, if they start going, well, why did you get fired? If they start to feed into that goal and they start to buy them drinks or they try and cheer them up or whatever, they then could reveal, I left my security card lying around. It was a breach of security because it means that anyone could get in through the access port at the back rather than the main doors. I only went out for a cigarette, or I went out because I needed to check whatever. It gives them the information. It's a coincidence that they happen to sit down next to this person. But at the same time, it's not forced. I also, and this is to be very, very clear, don't advocate that just because the player characters have missed something, that you should then immediately insert an NPC who will give them the missing information. Because otherwise what happens is you're training your players to then never have to think for themselves, but to wait for the coincidental NPC who's going to come and give them info.
Yeah, I always say have them work for it.
Exactly. Have them work for it, and also sometimes have them miss and go, oh, there's a security key here. Can I hack into it? Sure. It's a super difficult hack. Oh, and by the way, you've only got 13 seconds. You guys are going to have to fall back or whatever it might be. So, coincidence it's a tool that you really have to learn. I'm going to use coincidence now because I need to, because of pacing, because the story's kind of slowing down. My players don't really know what to do. So here's a little bit of coincidence to help nudge them in the right way. And if you want to see how powerful it is, when you watch a film or a TV series, look at the coincidences that happen in those shows to just spark the idea of the character to work something out. It's actually a bit tropey. Oftentimes you'll see when characters are trying to think through a problem, which no human being in reality would ever connect two things together, just because they're having a conversation with random person and they see the traffic light change from red to blue or red to green. They suddenly go, oh, yes, that's the secret code for solar flare calculations. It's the shifting of the light spectrum. And you're like, really? You got that from looking at a traffic light? I need to spend more time, right? So these things happen in our stories because we need to sometimes connect the dots. And so knowing that allows you to then choose when to connect those dots or to not sort of connect them.
Yeah, that's great advice. I love that. Shifting gears a little bit, you do talk about another section in your book, what if It is basically the game master's thought experiments to try to add variety to the game and to just think logically within your the constraints of your world. Where can this story go? Where can this plot go? Where can this player's backstory flourish? Talk to us about what if is.
What if is, for me, one of the big unlocks. It is an opportunity for you to break away from trying to figure stuff out to just having fun. And it's, okay, what if the players break into the nuclear bunker and the nuclear device has already been stolen? You go, okay, well, what does that mean to the whole story? What does that mean to the narrative? What does that mean to the game? Well, if I reference where we are in our structure, and if I reference the tone, I might then be able to say, oh, well, actually, that's quite an interesting development. What if that did happen? Well, who stole it first? Because the question, what if this happens? You then apply the 5 W's and 1 H. What happened? Who did it? Why did they do it? What did they do it with? Or what has happened as a result? Where is it now gone? And how did they do it? And those seem like quite big questions to have to answer immediately until you realize you don't have to do that. The players break into the nuclear bunker. They've got all of the codes because of coincidence, because of this, because of that. They've done their little combat sequence. They've done their hacking, et cetera, et cetera. They get there in the nuclear silo. The core of the nuclear bomb. I don't really know nuclear weapons, but I always know there's a core, right? There's a core that they have to defuse or prevent from ignition or however these things work, right?
Yeah.
But the core is already gone. And you're like, okay. The players are going to be going, okay, what the hell? And they're going to start exploring that space, hopefully, trying to figure out what's happened. And whilst they're exploring that space, you can also be exploring that space, going, yeah, how the hell... where would this have gone? Remember that colonel that wanted to become a general because of his OGAS? Well, what if he used the opportunity of the PCs breaking in to cover the fact that he's already stolen it? Oh, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. Sure. So how did he do it? Well, when they were breaking in, tripping the secret silent alarms, which they didn't research or discover through their investigations, maybe that's when he put it into this special container, which the player characters may learn about later on, or they may discover some shavings on the edge of the casing. Oh, that's a pretty cool idea. And then you can run with it. So you're building these things as the players are exploring them, you're exploring your answers as well. But the what if, again, allows you to just apply it and go, yeah, but I think if I look at my structure, I'm supposed to be closing this thing down, and all of this kernel thing is going to do, it's just going to open up a whole new can of worms. So that what if thought experiment, no, it doesn't work. So as the player characters open the door, they discover the nuclear device, and it's still there, right?
Yeah, but it's good to explore those questions because your players might even trigger that kind of event to happen. Yes. And it's good to be like, oh yeah, I kind of thought about that, if that could happen. Correct. So now I know how to trigger this event the proper way.
Exactly.
To make it work.
And I also find that, and this happens far more when you're playing around the table rather than when you're playing online, is I'll be sitting there, my players are talking to each other, and they're like, oh, what if we open this door and we discover an entire army waiting for us on the other side? They're doing the what if. And then I'm sitting there going, well, what if that was the case? Where did they come from? Why are they there? Who alerted them to the fact? Because the players were doing really good stuff that was going on. No, I don't think that what if works. But what if it happened when they were leaving? Mm-hmm. Oh, that's interesting, because then they have to try and fight their way out or whatever. So it doesn't really happen online because there isn't that interplayer banter that happens because of the microphones and how audio works on online conferencing and stuff. Yeah, it's a really useful tool to just have for when you're drawing a blank, going, oh, I don't know what should happen next. Well, what if something else happened, that you can use coincidence, because that's your tool, to link to this whole thing type of thing. So
yeah, I like that. One of the examples that I always use in my mind is that scene in Star Wars where Luke and Obi-Wan, they're driving their speeder, they come up against the two stormtroopers,
right,
and then Obi-Wan does a "we're not the droids you're looking for" thing. I think to myself, if I was a game master, I'm thinking, all right, they're going to come, these stormtroopers are going to arrest them, and then, they're going to take them in, and then they're going to have to fight out of the jail. Well, the player that played Obi-Wan totally nat 20'd that persuasion.
My persuasion. Yeah,
exactly. So that whole plan of them going to jail and fighting and doing all that is gone. It's out the window. So now if I didn't have the what if they passed, somehow got past those two stormtroopers, then I would be stuck in the mud a little bit trying to figure out what to do next.
Sure. I think that's a great example actually to carry through, because you look at it and you go, okay, so yes, that's an example of what if you had planned the prison escape and you've drawn the map of the prison and you've worked out how they're going to get out of it and you put in all of that effort. Okay, apply the technique I like to use. Those stormtroopers, they don't need a full OGAS, but it's useful. Their OGAS: occupation, stormtrooper, goal, find some droids with a vague description in a city filled with scrap droids. Okay, we're looking for 2 people. Okay, so my attitude, I really don't care. I'm on shift duty, right? And my stake.
What are the chances that these 2 guys are the 2
exactly
guys, what I mean?
Right? And my stake is like 0. Okay, because Darth Vader's not here. If Darth Vader was here, my stake would be a lot higher, because death is pretty much a guarantee when he's around. So no stake, right? This, so the Jedi mind trick works perfectly. But as the GM, you're going, okay, so they sail right through, no problems. I do feel like the pacing is requiring me to have some kind of conflict or some kind of difficulty for the characters to experience. Oh, well, by coincidence, there is this weird-nosed spy who happens to be looking around and sees the 2 droids being put into the Millennium Falcon's hangar bay, right? And he alerts the stormtroopers. So that's how you then tie it back, going, okay, well, the 2 stormtroopers, they really didn't play a role at all. But the spy did. And the spy just happened to be around, and by coincidence was just hanging outside this particular hangar bay and saw this particular event taking place. So, I was going to say, and your players, it's not like you punish them for doing something amazing. No. You actually put them in an advantageous position. They're in the Millennium Falcon already, so now they just got to get out of here. Exactly. So, but with just a little bit of tension, a little bit of conflict, it's helped to move things along, and the players feel like they've achieved great things. You're sitting back going, I never planned any of that, but that was cool. That was them escaping from a city that was under guard. This was fun.
They figured it out. I threw obstacles at them and they overcame them. Again, you're reacting to them. It's like, oh man, they got past my guards. Well, there's probably going to be a spy there. Let's see, does the spy notice them? You roll. Yep, he notices them. But good for them. They got past those guards. They're in a better position now. They're in the Millennium Falcon, basically. And now they just have to work to get out of there.
I do think something important to point out is that even if you had drawn the detention center that you were planning on putting them in, just because they didn't use it then doesn't mean that that's wasting your time. You can save that for later. I have a game that I run every Sunday, and I like to draw maps, but maps take a long time to draw, right? And I often just do it as a hobby. I'm like, I wonder if I could draw a map that looks like this, and then I'll spend some time drawing it, and then I file it away. And my one player said to me, he's like, it doesn't matter where we go. You have maps ready. How do you do this? I'm like, well, I've spent 6 years as a professional GM creating maps. I have that luxury. But I remember when I was still getting into role playing, I loved drawing maps, and I had a folder just filled with different maps. It did get to a point though with my one group where they're like, okay, which map is he pulling out now? Oh, it's that detention block map. Because I used to play a lot of Star Wars in the day. I'm like, yes, it is, but I'm going to make some changes quickly. And that was sort of before I adopted the approach of making maps up on the fly, which is okay if you're sitting around the table because you're drawing on graph paper and that kind of stuff. If you're doing it online, it's a little bit trickier, but the principle still holds.
Now, let's suppose, Guy, that me and you are having this conversation and a giant banana appears in my lap. Talk to us about the giant banana.
Yes. The giant banana has been around for quite some time. And it is literally meant to get you to smile if you're a 13-year-old like I am. And it is there to help break you out of thinking. Because sometimes we get stuck. We go, we've got all of these constraints. We've got all of these things. We know our tone and we know where we're supposed to be in the structure, but we just don't, nothing is grabbing us. Nothing is inspiring us in terms of these ideas. Insert a giant banana. Just drop a giant 3-ton banana into the middle of the scene. And you go, well, that's ridiculous. I'm playing Cyberpunk. Where the hell would a giant banana come from? Well, that's a good question. Is it a mechanical display that's dropped off of the top of the building because a sniper is moving up there trying to take out the party, or because there's a fight going on up there? Maybe it fell off of a starship and it's an exotic fruit that's being brought in from some distant off-world planet, and it looks like a spider, but it actually unfurls like a giant squid, which is bright yellow, and now starts to eat everybody. Well, that's ridiculous. But maybe instead of it being a giant banana, what if it's a giant rancor from Star Wars, or if it's a rhinoceros? Okay, well, then it would probably start rampaging. So sometimes you can just use this ridiculous idea to get you to think around areas and to just have fun and go, yeah, well, what if this, what if this, what if this, what if this, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, cool. And I can replace it. So it becomes almost, and I hate to say this because I was literally talking to my partner this morning about how I have never used algebra. I learned it in high school and it's a complete waste of time. Well, now I kind of am using it because where banana equals X, you can replace banana with X, and X could be some other cool stuff. So yeah, it is literally just a fun way of changing gears for just a moment, being a bit silly, and then seeing where your mind kind of wanders and where it goes.
Yeah, you're really just testing the constraints is what you're doing. Is you're like, you know, to bring it to Cyberpunk, the players, they're investigating, they're in the middle of a square, they're talking to people, and then MaxTac, the most elite police force, just drops down from an aerial vehicle. And it's like, why are they there? What are they doing there? Are they after the players? How are the players going to react? And those are the kinds of wild card situations that will test your constraints, test your ability as a game master, and give you really fun ideas to just spice up the game when you don't know what to do, really.
Absolutely.
That's the idea of the giant banana, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's awesome. I love that. Now shifting gears a little bit to the specific type of setting and tone. We talked about that a little bit. A lot, obviously my viewers, they're cyberpunk folks. So what kind of advice would you have for people that want to create cyberpunk campaigns and want to make sure that that cyberpunk tone is throughout their campaign?
Cyberpunk has, I think its core definition has remained the same from when it started in, what was it, the early 80s, late 70s, where we have this dystopian future. But already I'm old enough to have remembered watching movies predicting what 2023 would be like. Yes, if you walk in downtown Tokyo, there are lots of giant displays, and there are people that have got jackets that have built-in USB chargers or built-in heaters. We don't yet have, you know, giant holographic images leaning out at us. Not yet. I'm sure Samsung will be with us the moment they have something like that. So I think it is about looking at that influence and saying, well, what actually now, the fact that we have, you know, mobile devices in the palm of our hand, which in the 80s was not a thing at all. How do we entrench that? How do we evolve some of the basic ideas of cyberpunk into what is more cyberpunky now for today's generation? But when you look at creating the setting, one of the challenges that you have with cyberpunk is that there is this preconceived notion of lots of rainy, neon-drenched cities with people very isolated, very sort of downtrodden, and then occasionally these high-powered, financially elite individuals living in these glass ivory tower type of things. What do we do to make ours feel unique from somebody else's? Or do we want to do that is a question. So another concept that we use in the book a lot is about taking those preconceived ideas and applying the three changes, which is entrenching the idea, subverting the idea, or altering the idea. And subverting the idea is like, okay, cool. Well, what if the cyberpunk world, what if what if it didn't rain? What if there was just this giant dome over the whole planet that was sometimes day and sometimes night? And there was no rain, so there is no miserable kind of thing, or poverty's been removed. Is it still cyberpunk, or is it now a sci-fi future? It's up to you. But when you subvert something, look at what the ripple effect would be. So if you kind of do cyberpunk, you're like, actually, Battlestar Galactica, the TV series, the remake, said, well, this ship actually doesn't have any interconnectivity. It's got analog stuff. That was a major subversion of the idea of hackers. There's no problem here. There's nothing to hack. These are old-fashioned wire connections. We use freaking telephones in the age of digital communication. That was an amazing subversion that created a much more interesting story. You don't have to do that, though. You can go the opposite way and entrench it and go, this is ultimate cyberpunk. This is where you've got your implant chips in the backs of your heads, and you can take it to another level where it's so cyberpunk. There are no such things as posters on the walls. It's now just QR codes, or it's augmented reality points so that your eyes, when they're looking at them, they're seeing stuff. But when you turn it off, it's just gray concrete, right? So that, I think, is the joy of looking at those fixed places and saying, okay, subvert, alter, or entrench. And of course, altering is where you're changing up just a few little things. So hover cars, is that too sci-fi, or is that cyberpunk? It's cyberpunk if you don't go too far, or if you limit this, or if you limit that. So yeah, with creating those settings, with creating the cyberpunk setting, however you do it, entrench, subvert, or alter, make sure that your players are on the same page. Because if they arrive at the game expecting good old-fashioned cyberpunk where there are hackers and there's rainstorms and dingy streets and that kind of stuff, and you're actually presenting it that it's actually just very brutalist concrete architecture everywhere, and there isn't that subculture because it's all virtual, that might be a disconnect for them. And that's what you don't want. You want everyone on the same page. So that would be my advice when approaching cyberpunk.
Yeah, because there's a lot of technology in cyberpunk, a lot of the questions I usually ask is, how accessible is the technology?
Right. Yes.
From my own personal experience, I've been to some areas in the world where I personally witnessed like really hardcore poverty to the level that I'd never seen before. And what I noticed is those people still had cell phones. and they still had internet access. They still had, you know, they might not live in a normal house apartment style. They might live in, like, you know, poverty, but they have the technology of something that, you know, is more advanced than what we used to get to the moon in the
Right.
60s. You know what I mean? So that's a question I ask myself as well in Cyberpunk. It's, what kind of cyberware do these people have? What kind of lifestyle are they living where technology is intersecting with their personal lives? And that's part of the grim, dark thing about it, is like, it's, they have these like advertisements on their phones that they'll never be able to purchase, you know, but ads are
Sure.
always going to be there no matter
Yes.
what.
Yes. Yes.
Cyberpunk is also a world of human beings. It's a human being world. If you're playing Shadowrun, you know, there's other elements to it. But as far as the Cyberpunk world of Mike Pondsmith, it's a human to human interaction kind of thing. What's your advice on game masters when they want to keep the tone of humanity and how humans interact with each other in a world of technology and corporate greed?
I don't know if this is a positive of humanity or a negative of humanity. We haven't changed, as far as we know, in 5,000 years of our recorded history, right? When you go back and you look at the first Sanskrit tablets that were found, it's their bills and their invoices, and it's people trying to live out their lives and trying to survive. So that is the core fundamental. How we do that, though, that's a very interesting question. And especially when it comes to cyberpunk, because we already can see in our own existence, I wouldn't say we're cyberpunk yet. And it does raise a question of what happens when we get there, because we are definitely heading in that direction. But look at things like VR. The biggest thing about VR was, yes, you can do stuff as if you were absolutely there, but your chat rooms, you can now see your other person, your other human being there. So we still want to make these connections, but we can also see that these connections should be in a virtual environment, in a safe environment, where we don't actually have to physically come into contact with people, or more importantly, we can avoid everybody else in between. And I think that is an interesting space. We want to be social, but we want to be social with only the people that we want to be social with, and not with anybody else. So how does that translate into a cyberpunk space? I think it allows us to create, I don't want to say multi-dimensional worlds, but I often feel that we need to explore, where is it that people go to feel happy in cyberpunk, because we don't often see that. I don't think, anyway. We often see the dystopian side of it, but people still need to find their joy somewhere. And so the idea of dropping into virtual rooms, or to have these spaces that people can go to, that everybody just steps into their own little private booth, but it projects a different world, or projects the world that they want to join into. Following that thread of how do the people in your world connect to their friends, I think opens up huge avenues of creativity to explore and to think, what would you do? And looking at how the world is currently moving, where we've got all of this AI stuff coming in, AI chat, AI art, AI music, I, as a GM, am watching it very closely, because
Me too.
There's a whole campaigns or adventures being written by AI now, drawing on the thousands of other campaigns that have ever existed. And you're going, cyberpunk has to now incorporate that. So is it that we're just going to get to a point where our friends are not even real? They're just these computer AI simulations running around? How would that affect the cyberpunk world? Possibly they could be completely banned, because it is such a a societal breaking space. Look at the Matrix. Now, I would say the Matrix is not cyberpunk necessarily.
It has elements, though, for sure.
It's got very strong elements. You look at what their whole idea was, that humanity needs certain amounts of trial and tribulation in order to function. These are components that I would add in, but it all still boils down to, how do two people in your world space, how do they connect? And where do they find a safe space to connect in? And when I was living in Japan, one of the amazing things was looking at a culture where there's phenomenal technology all around, and yet the biggest societal questions was not, how do I get more bandwidth? Because they were running terabyte networks, right? When we were still running megabyte networks. The question was, I need to connect with someone else. And all the technology in the world does not help me. It might help me find these people faster, but I still need to have some kind of physical interaction.
Yeah, isolation is a poison, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I've found that in the world of cyberpunk, you know, somebody might believe that you got to be the loner badass that relies on nobody, trusts nobody, and live that kind of lifestyle. But in reality, you won't live a very long, fulfilling life in cyberpunk if you have nobody that you can trust. You need help. You just can't do it on your own. There's organizations out there that will take you out and you will be forgotten. And it can happen at any point in time. But if you have a good fixer, you got a good crew, you got trust and reputation in the streets, then you have more opportunity and more tools to survive in such a grim world.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Guy, I think we've done an hour after our little preamble conversation.
Right.
Is there any other aspect of the book that you wanted to talk about before we sign off?
I have tried in the book to include as many examples of what I'm talking about as possible, because there's the chapter that you work through, then there's the exercise that you do, and I've always done the exercise as well. And I specifically did that so that there was a reference point, not something to copy, but some way of seeing, oh, okay, this is how, or this is what he did, this is what I've done. It's not to say this is the perfect answer, it's just to say this is an answer. And sometimes I even wrote in the book, this was not the right answer, but I've given you this answer to show you why it's not the right answer. Here are the errors that make mistakes or things along those lines. At the end of the book, though, if you have worked through all of the exercises, you walk away with a game ready to run. And it doesn't matter what setting you're playing, you walk away with a game ready to run. And if you are in the world building section, you may walk away with a world that you have completely created from scratch, or you might have taken an existing world and have made it your own, or you have taken an existing world and that somebody else has created and you're empowered to run it. But at the end of the book, you are ready to play a game and it's complete. You've got everything in there that you will need, in my opinion, to actually run your game and to get going and to participate. So I wanted it not just to be a book that you go, oh, well, I've read the book. Gee, there were some interesting ideas in there. Put the book on the bookshelf. Right, now let me start doing the work. I want the person reading this book to go, I can do the work while I'm reading it. And so by the time the book goes onto the bookshelf, it's already done.
Yeah.
So hopefully
that's what those encounter situations are in the book, which, by the way, has really amazing artwork. Some of the artwork, I'm just sitting there and I'm like, what's going on in this world? There's a goat man holding his head and, and all kinds of things going on. But yeah, I definitely, throughout the book, a big section of the book is you, right? You said there's 3 sections.
Yeah.
One of the sections is identifying you, your voice, what you like, and what sparks joy in you as a game master. And it's definitely not something, the book's not preachy. It's not telling you this is what you got to do, this is right, this is wrong. It's really just identifying the various aspects of what being a game master is, and the different styles. So I really appreciate that about the book, because it helps. I've learned throughout, being a game master throughout the years, that there's no right or wrong way. There is a right way, actually. It's your way, right? The right way is your way, the way you and your players want to play.
Yes.
The personal way that you and the 5 or 4 people that are at your table, that's the right way to play. And the book just helps you identify exactly what that is, so you can use that as a tool to create epic campaigns. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Anything else? I think we really covered the book, didn't we?
Pretty much, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Guy, I just want to thank you for everything you've done for all the tabletop communities. Your advice on your channel has definitely inspired me. And the book is an amazing book. I'm happy to have been one of the first 500.
Yeah.
My full government name's in there for you Easter egg folks that want to look in there and try to stalk me. But but yeah, I just want to say thank you. It's an amazing book. And the next time you write the next practical guide, I'll be ready to talk to you about it. All right.
Fantastic. Lovely. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chooms, for watching. You can go to, I make sure to add like a little thing in the beginning of the video to tell people where to go. But if you can, please let everybody know where they can get the book, tell them about your channel and everything.
Right. So to pick up a copy of the Practical Guide to Becoming a Great GM, you can head on over to our website, which is www.greatgamemaster.com. And you'll find the book there, along with all of the other books and things. There's an audiobook version of it as well, PDF versions. And then all of the exercises that are in the book, you can actually download as a separate workbook. That's on the website. Download that free of charge and use that as your manual. It's a PDF form fillable document, just to make it as easy as possible to prevent anyone from having the excuse to say, oh, I can't DM, I can't GM. No. Yes, you can. And the forms are there to prove it. So yeah, check out www.greatgamemaster.com.
Yep, and make sure you guys subscribe to his YouTube channel, How to Be a Great GM, on YouTube. A lot of great content. If you like my stuff, you're gonna like Guy's stuff. I mean, that's just a matter of fact. And once again, thank you, Guy. I'll see you on the next one. All right?
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Bye, guys.